Alright, so now we are actually going to start creating an interesting website. And I thought it would be fun if the websites we are actually going to make using this ChatGPT AI would be a website where we offer our services as a freelancer that makes websites very fast using AI assistants. So you all are immediately able to start your freelancing business once you've done with this course. So, you can thank me later for that. But let's first take a look at what such a freelancing website would actually look like so that we are able to ask ChatGPT a precise question about what it has to create for us. So let's quickly go to Google and let's type in design of a personal freelancer website. And let's go to images and see what it says. Alright, so let's scroll through this a little bit. It looks like most of these start with a big picture of the person themselves with a small introduction about what they do. And then typically it looks like it's followed by an about section. So a little longer introduction of what they actually offer as a service and who they are. So I think we can start with that. So let's go to ChatGPT. So I'm going to ask it to give me the HTML code for a website within the header, a big picture on the right, and on the left, the title of a freelance web designer, a 2-line introduction of the AI-assisted web design services I offer, and a call to action. Below this header, I want an about section that introduces me and my services in about 200 words. So let's see what it gives us. Alright, so it starts typing. It gave us the title freelance web designer. Apparently we are specialized in creating modern websites. And it also wrote us this 200-word paragraph, and it actually left blank spaces that we can add our own name, the own location we are in, and the number of years of experience within this industry, which is very nice. So let's just copy this whole code. Or actually, instead of selecting it all and hitting Ctrl+C, you can actually just click here, copy code. There we go. And let's go to Visual Studio. Alright, so here back in Visual Studio, we can now just delete this code and paste the new code that we have over it. And then we can hit Ctrl+S to save this file. And then we can hit right mouse click, open in default browser. And let's see what this looks like. Alright, so as you can see, this still looks quite ugly, but of course we haven't used any CSS code yet. And CSS is the layer on top of HTML that makes everything look interesting. So to get some CSS code for this HTML code, we can simply go back to ChatGPT and ask it, now also provide accompanying CSS code to make the website look beautiful and modern. So let's see what it gives us. Alright, so it gave us all the CSS code that we need, and apparently it gave us a website with a dark background and white text, which could be pretty nice. And it also changes some of the other settings like the font and the font size. So let's just copy this code. And now let's go back to Visual Studio. And now we actually have to put this in a separate file. So let's go here to the top left and hit New File. And let's make that CSS code.css. And let's hit enter. And now we have this new file, and it knows this should be a CSS file because we put the extension .css. And let's just paste this code right here. There we go. And if we hit Ctrl+S, and we now go to open in default browser, it will still look the same. And that's because if we go back to this code, we haven't linked this CSS code to this HTML file. So of course we could manually add something to this code to refer to this CSS code, but we can also just ask ChatGPT to give us that code. So let's go back to ChatGPT and let's ask it, please provide the HTML code that refers to the CSS file and tell me where I have to place it. And let's hit enter and let's see if it can do that. Alright, so we have to create a separate CSS file. We already did that. So it looks like in the head we have to add this part. So link style sheet with the reference style.css. And it also says we need to create a file called style.css, so we may have to change the name of our CSS file. So it looks like from the description we can just copy this line of code and go to Visual Studio, and in the head right here below title, let's just paste that right there, and now it refers to style.css, so we have to rename this file, or we can just write right here CSS code.css, because that's what we called our CSS file. And let's hit Ctrl S to save this, and let's now go to the preview in our default browser, and there we go. So it looks like it gave us a header with a black background, and the rest of the website is going to be a white background. So it is starting to look like a pretty nice website. But one thing I'm missing here is the image. So here it just says header image. So let's go to the Visual Studio Code and see where it created the image. So right here we can see this piece of code that says image source, and it says header-image.jpg. But of course we don't actually have an image that this is referring to. So let's get that image. So there are two things we could do. We could of course upload a photo of ourselves to place on this website, but we could also do something else. So as most of you probably know, OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, also created an AI image generation service. So most of you probably know about DALL-E, where you get 50 free image generations, but after that you have to pay. But there's actually also a completely free and unlimited version on the OpenAI website. So if we go back to Chrome and we type in www.open.ai/images and hit enter, we get this OpenAI image generation page. Now if we go back to the examples of freelancing pages, we want an image something like this. But AI is very bad at generating actual human faces, so it's better if we create some sort of cartoon or drawing that is sort of a persona of the freelancer that we want to portray. So let's go to OpenAI images, and with most of these image generators, it's better to be very specific to get the best results. So let's type in a young creative person, comma, with his arms crossed, comma, smiling excitedly, comma, with a white background, comma, cartoon, comma, digital art. And let's see what that gives us. Alright, so some of these might be usable, but let's give it one more run to see if something better comes up. Alright, so a lot of these are giving child cartoon images, so maybe instead of a young creative person, let's just write a creative person. And let's hit enter to see what it gives us. Alright, that's already looking a little bit better, but let's give it another run. Alright, so a lot of these actually look a little bit too excited. So let me change this to saying smiling excitedly while still looking professional. And let's hit generate. Nice. Okay, so I think this one looks pretty cool. So what we can do now is just download it right here. And then I'm going to place this in the Visual Studio folder that we made. So the Visual Studio folder named My First Website. Alright, so I went ahead and put that image in the Visual Studio folder My First Website. And as you can see, once we open Visual Studios, this image immediately pops up right here on the top left. And now we can refer to this image within our code. So if we go here to the HTML code where it refers to the image, we can simply delete this text, this random name that ChatGPT gave our image, and we can start typing A. And Visual Studio is very nice in auto-filling your code for you. So even with one letter, it already knows I want to refer to the image, and I can just click this or hit enter. And there we go, it automatically fills the entire name. And now if we simply hit Ctrl S to save it, and go to the preview in the default browser, we can see it popped up here perfectly. But I think it would actually look a little bit nicer if the background here would be transparent. And we can actually do that very easily. So there are two websites I recommend for removing the background of an image very easily. So the first is remove.bg. You can simply drag an image in here, and it will remove the background for you, as you can see. Now you can download a preview version of 500 by 500 pixels, or you can download a full HD picture, but that's going to cost you credits, which you only get a limited amount of, and you have to pay for to get more. But since the full size of this image is only 512 by 512 pixels, the preview version is actually pretty close to the final result, so we might as well download that one. But before we do that, as you can see here, there's a little bit that it missed, so we can just hit edit, and then go to erase/restore, and then we get this eraser tool, and we can just click right there so that the final piece is also deleted. And let's click download and download image. So that's the first website we can use, remove.bg, but there's also another one, and that's a service by Adobe, Adobe Express. And if you type into Google Adobe Express background remover and click the first link, you get to this website, and this is a very good, very powerful background remover. And you can also add all these effects, as you can see here, but you do have to create an account first. So it will take a little bit longer to set up, but then you have a pretty nice background remover. So if you plan to use this feature more often, and it's very often used in web design, I would definitely make an account on Adobe Express. But for now, I'm just going to use the results that remove.bg gave us. So I'm now back in Visual Studio, and I went ahead and added the new image with the removed background to the folder, and I deleted the previous one that did have the background. So now let's delete this reference to the previous image, and let's start typing again. There we go. And now you can see it added this extension remove BG preview. So now if we hit Ctrl S to save this, and we go to the preview, we have this very nice image avatar right there in our header. Alright, so that's it for this lesson. In the next lesson, we are going to work on extending this website and making it look a little bit more exciting. Hope to see you in that lesson. Alright, so ChatGPT updated and did not save any of my chat history, but I'll show you in a minute how we can have ChatGPT work with our existing code even if it does not have it stored at that moment. But first we want to expand our site a little bit. So right now we have this header section and this about me section, but this is not a very exciting or convincing freelancer website. So the last time how we got inspiration for this website is by simply going on Google and typing in freelancer website, and we basically copied these elements off of what was most commonly used. But of course we can also just ask ChatGPT what elements should be in a good promoting freelancer website. So let's go to ChatGPT and let's ask it, I have a website to promote my freelancing business where I do AI assisted web design. Give me the outlines for such a website and please make it a one-pager. And let's actually say I want, because we don't have the website yet. And let's see what ChatGPT gives us. And it looks like I have to refresh this page. So let's copy this text. Let's refresh. And let's just paste that and ask it again. Alright, so it's going to give us some sections. So it starts with the header. That should communicate our value. Then an about section, as we already have. And then it also suggested a bunch of other sections. So it suggests a services section, showing the services we offer, a portfolio section, a testimonial section, a contact section, a footer, and also we should create some sort of a navigation for our website. Which of course this is not that important for us yet because we only have a one-pager. So now for the next step, we would of course want ChatGPT to add one of these sections or maybe multiple of them to our own code. But right now we can't just ask it to add it to our code because it doesn't know what our code is yet because we started this new session. But if we go to Visual Studio and we simply copy the HTML code right here and go back to ChatGPT, I'm going to tell it, this is my HTML code, please remember it for my following question. And then I'm just going to paste the HTML code I just copied from Visual Studio and let's hit enter. And as you can see, it says it saved the HTML code. So now it will remember it and we can refer to it in the future. But let's first also copy our CSS code. So let's go here, let's hit Ctrl A to select it all, Ctrl C to copy it. And let's go to ChatGPT and let's tell it this CSS code belongs to the HTML code I just sent you. Please also save it for my coming question. And I'm just going to paste all the CSS code and hit enter. And as you can see, it also saves this code. And now we can actually start asking it to do something new with this code. So if you go back to our website, the first thing I actually want to change before we add anything new is I want to make sure that the content of this header is only as wide as the content of the rest of the website. So as wide as this about me section. So let's go to Visual Studio, and in the CSS code, we can see that here in this section piece in the CSS code, it says max width is 800 pixels. So we also want the header content to be only within 800 pixels. So we can go to ChatGPT and tell it, in the above code, please change the CSS of the header so that all of the content of the header is no wider than 800 pixels. And let's hit enter and see if it does that. Alright, so it looks like this time it didn't give us the full CSS code, and it only gave us the header section, and it looks like we can just replace the current header section that we have with this one. So let's see here, this is the header part of the CSS code, and let's paste the new part, and it added these final 2 rows, and let's hit Ctrl S to save that, and let's go to preview in default browser. Alright, so that's not exactly what we wanted. I would have preferred if this background would have stayed the full width, but it's fine for now. Alright, so let's now go back to ChatGPT and let's look at the sections that it suggested us for a freelancing website. So I think a testimonial section would look pretty cool on our website. And also I would like the website to have a footer. So let's ask ChatGPT to give us those sections. Now add to our website the testimonial section you suggested and also give the website a footer with our contact information. And let's hit enter. So it looks like it isn't going to repeat all the code that we asked it to integrate this code in. It's just going to give us the bland code. But it is creating the sections we asked it, and the text it's writing is actually pretty good. So this is of course where ChatGPT really shines, is in creating this sort of copywritten content. And so it's also going to give us this CSS code. So it just gave us the CSS code and the HTML code without integrating it, and I'm going to see if it can integrate it for us. So I'm going to ask it, now please integrate the code you just wrote in the code I asked you to save previously. And let's see if it can do that. Alright, so it starts at the top. This is looking good. And here we can see the CSS code.css. We know this is the code we asked it to save because this is the name we actually created ourselves. So this is going to be a lot of text. I wonder if it will be able to do all of it. But if not, there's a trick we can do to have it actually complete this. Alright, so it did actually manage to give us all of the HTML code with the new integration. So that's really nice. So let's just copy this code and paste it in our HTML code. So let's select all of that and paste. And then let's go back here to the CSS code it gave us. Let's copy that and let's go to our CSS code file, go to the bottom, and we can just paste that right there to the bottom of the file and hit Ctrl S to save that one and save this one as well. And let's go to the preview and see what it made us. Alright, so here's the parts we already had. Then here's this pretty nice testimonial section. And of course from here we can edit this text and format it however we want to. But for now this looks pretty good. And it also made us this footer. And it's pretty funny right here. It says copyright 2022, even though it's trained on data from 2021 and before. And it's actually 2023 right now. But of course we can change all of that later. Alright, so let's just keep going with this. So let's go back to ChatGPT, let's scroll up and let's add the other sections that it gave us. So I'm going to ask it, now also add a services and a portfolio section. And I want the portfolio section to have an image slider. So I'm going to ask it and give the portfolio section an image slider. And let's just see how much we can ask it in one time. So I'm going to ask it and also add a contact section and a navigation bar that when an item is clicked, automatically scrolls to the proper section. So I'm not sure if it's going to be able to do this, but let's just ask it and let's scroll down so we can see what it's doing. Alright, so now it's actually filling it with lorem ipsum, so it's not going to customize it for the freelance website that we asked it to create it. So now it's doing the portfolio section and it's actually creating the slider that we asked it to. So it looks like it created 3 images that can be in the slider. And now it's creating the contact form for us. And there it's creating the navigation bar. So here it is telling us that we need to also use JavaScript to make the image slider and the navigation bar work. But since we haven't covered JavaScript yet, we will leave that out for now. And the navigation bar will actually still work even without JavaScript. But by adding the JavaScript, we would be able to add a nice animation to the scroll down. But for now, let's just ask ChatGPT to also add the CSS code to the HTML sections it just made us. So I'm going to ask it, please also provide the CSS code for all the sections you just gave.
Alright, so it seems this is the first time we asked too much code from ChatGPT, and sometimes it will just stop as it did right there. And if you would simply ask it to continue, often it will repeat the whole code and won't be able to finish it again. But if you ask ChatGPT to continue where it left off in a very specific way, it will just finish the code for us. So I'm going to ask it, you did not finish writing the full CSS code. Please continue where you left off at #contact label without repeating any of the code you already gave. And let's see what that does. So as you can see, it apologizes for not finishing it and then just gives us exactly what we want. Alright, so now we have the CSS code and the HTML code right here for the portfolio section, for the services section, and also for a navigation bar right here. So let's first copy the HTML code and let's place that in our Visual Studio code, and let's go down here, let's put it above the footer, and let's hit Ctrl V to place all that in, and let's hit Ctrl S to save that, and then let's go back to ChatGPT, and it gave us the CSS code, the edit CSS code in 2 pieces. So let's first copy the first part, and let's go back to Visual Studio, let's go to the CSS code, let's go to the bottom here, and let's just paste that below there. And then as you can see, it didn't finish this content label part, but if we go back to ChatGPT and we copy this section, you can see it starts right here exactly where it left off. So if we go to Visual Studio, we can just put it right there, hit Ctrl V, and that finished it off perfectly right there. And now there was also the navigation bar section that it gave us separately, so let's copy that as well, and let's go to Visual Studio again, let's paste that, hit Ctrl S to save it, and let's see what that looked like. And there we go, so we have our trusted avatar right there. We have the testimonials, we have a services section, and now it did only lorem ipsum, so it didn't customize the text for us. And here's the portfolio with the image slider that is not working because we don't have the JavaScript. And right here we have a contact section, and it looks like the fields where we can actually type don't have any borders, so the CSS code it gave us there isn't very pretty, but it does contain a name section, an email section, and the actual message part, and also a send button, which is pretty nice. And then right now all the way at the bottom right here we have our navigation bar, and I actually want this to be right here above the About Me section. So let's go back to Visual Studio and let's go to the HTML code. Let's select this navigation section right here. Let's hit Ctrl X to cut that away there. And let's go to the About Me section, which is right here below the header. And let's paste that navigation section right there. And now if we hit Ctrl S and we go to the preview, we have the navigation bar right there. And this should also work right now. So if we click Portfolio, it brings us to the portfolio section, and if we hit contact, it brings us all the way to the bottom. If we hit about, it's already there. If we hit services, it drops us down to the services place. So the navigation bar already works, which is very nice. So now there are a few small things that I want to change. So let's go back to ChatGPT, and I'm going to ask it for the services section, please, instead of the filler text, add different services that an AI assisted web design freelancer might offer. And I made a typo there, so let's change that. It has to be freelancer. And I'm also going to ask it to change the CSS code of the contact form to make it look more modern. So I'm going to ask it, please also change the CSS code of the contact form to make it look more modern. Alright, so it wrote pretty nice text for the HTML part of the services section, and now it's going to give us a new contact form CSS code. And there it is. So let's first copy this CSS code. Let's go to Visual Studio, to the CSS code, and let's find the contact sections. So that's going to be this, this, and this. And let's paste the new contact form CSS code. Then let's go back to Visual Studio and let's copy the sections HTML code. And let's go to the HTML code, find the services section. That's right there. To there, and let's paste that, and now we have it with actual good copywritten text. So let's hit Ctrl S here, and let's also go to the CSS code and hit Ctrl S, and let's go to the preview to see what this looks like. And there we go. So let's go to the services section, and you can see right here it added this new text for us, and the contact section now also looks a lot better, where you can actually see the text fields where you can input this. Now of course this contact form won't work yet, as of right now, because we don't have this connected to a database, so there's nowhere this message will actually be sent, but we are actually going to look into that in future lessons, so stay tuned for that. But that's it for this lesson, see you in the next one. Hi everyone, welcome to the next lesson. So in this one, we are going to turn this one-pager website into a website with multiple pages. So what I want at the end of this video is if I click About, it's not going to bring me down to the About section on this website, but it's going to give me to a separate page. So let's first go to Visual Studio, and right here we have our HTML code, and right now we have this HTML file and this CSS file. But if we want multiple pages, we are going to need more HTML files, because every page on a website is going to have its own HTML file. And now, since we are pretty soon going to work with a server online to actually upload our website, it starts getting important how we name these files. So now we just named it home.html and csscode.css, but those are actually not the names they are supposed to have. So the HTML file for our front page is actually supposed to be called index.html. So let's change that. We can simply hit right mouse click, rename, and then change that to index.html and hit enter. And our CSS file is actually supposed to be called style.css. So let's also change that name. And let's hit enter. And now getting multiple pages is actually not that difficult. So we could simply create a new file right here, and we could name that contact.html and hit enter. And now there's one thing we need to change first before we go to the preview, which is if we go to index.html, we actually refer in this file to the CSS file. And now since we changed the name, we also have to change the reference within this code. So if you see right here, the link to the style sheet is still going to csscode.css, and that won't work anymore. So let's change that to style.css. And now if we save that, and if we go to the preview in our browser, as you can see, this all looks just the same, and we just created this contact page. But if we click here, of course we still are led here because we didn't change that reference. But if we go up here to the link, right now you can see we are at index.html, but if we simply change that to contact and hit enter, we get to this empty contact page that we just created, as you can see on the top left here. So that's how easy it is to create new pages, but let's actually see if ChatGPT can do it for us. So here we are at ChatGPT, and what I'm going to ask it now is, I have a one-pager website and want to turn it into a multiple page website where every section gets its own page. This is my HTML code of the one-pager. Please give me the separate HTML codes for each page. And then I'm just going to go into Visual Studio and select this whole code, copy it, and then I'm going to paste it right there, because we made some changes and it's good to just give the whole code again so that it will know exactly what to do. So let's hit enter and see if it's able to do that. Alright, awesome. So as you can see, it gave us the name that we have to name this HTML file, and then just going to write that part, and let's see if it actually parses up the pages the way we want it to. Awesome, so as you can see, it made this navigation bar right here, and it also changes the tags. So it used to be hashtag contact, and that would make it so that it will scroll down, and now it actually names it to the correct HTML page that we wanted to go to. And here it's creating the About HTML page, and it's also putting in the navigation bar there as well, so that we are not stuck once we go to another page. And there it's creating the services page. And it looks like that was a little too much. So as we did in last lesson, we can just ask it to continue if we ask very specifically. So I'm going to ask it, you did not finish giving the codes of all the HTML files. Please continue where you left off on the services.html page without repeating any of the code you already gave. And I can see I made a typo, so let's make that please. And let's hit enter and see if it will continue for us. And there it goes. It just continues from the services.html page. And there it's creating the portfolio page. And it looks like it ran out of steam again. So let's just copy this message that we sent it right here to continue. And let's paste that here. And now instead of continuing from services.html, let's ask it to continue from portfolio.html, and let's hit enter and see if it will continue. Awesome, and now it's creating the testimonials. And it's not able to finish this one. So let's hit Ctrl V again. And now instead of services, let's make that testimonials. And let's hit enter again. Alright, so it looks like it was able to do the contact form and the testimonial section in one go, but I actually wonder if there was anything more it was going to write us. So I'm just going to ask it to continue from the contact section and see if there was anything more it was going to give us. And let's hit enter. Alright, so it looks like there was no more code it was going to give us, but it did give us an explanation of how to use this HTML code and that we have to link it all correctly, and also that we can use one CSS file for all these separate HTML files. So we can now go in Visual Studio and create all these HTML files and paste all this code in there. So if we go to a section with a navigation bar, we can see all the files that we have to make right here. So let's go to Visual Studio, and we already have the contact.html, and now let's create a new file. Let's call that testimonials.html, and let's create a new file called services.html and another file called about.html. And finally, we have a file called portfolio.html, and let's hit enter. So I'm going to leave the front page as it is for now, but let's fill up all these other pages. So let's go to ChatGPT and let's go to the top here where we asked it. There we go. So we can actually replace the navigation bar on the home page so that this will all lead to all the other pages. And let's select the navigation bar in the current index page and let's paste the new ones so that we have all these links to the other pages. And then let's go to ChatGPT again. Let's copy the code for the about page. Let's go to Visual Studio. Let's go to the about.html file. Let's paste that. Let's hit Ctrl S to save it. And let's go to the other pages. So next we have the services page right there. Let's go to Visual Studio, services, paste, hit Ctrl S. Let's go to ChatGPT again. Let's find the portfolio page code. There we go. Go to portfolio, hit paste, hit Ctrl S to save it. And I'll do that for the other pages as well. Alright, so as you can see right now, we have all these HTML files with the proper code. And now if we go to the index.html page and we go to preview in default browser, this should now all work. So we have this index page, the home page, that we didn't change anything about except for this navigation bar. So now these should link to different pages. So let's click about, and there we go. We are at the about page. We can go to services, go to the services page, portfolio page with the image slider that's not yet working. Then we can go to the testimonials page and the contact page. So now one final thing I would want to change is that every single one of these pages has the footer as well that we have on the home page. So we have this footer here, and I actually want that to be on all the pages. So what I can simply do is go to Visual Studio, go to the index page, find the footer section, which is right here, select that and copy it, and then go to all the pages and simply just above the final body tag, paste that. There we go. And let's do that for all these pages. And let's also make sure we save all these pages. And then if we go to preview in default browser, so we go to the about page, and there we go. We do have this footer, but of course it's not placed very nicely, but I think that's fine for now. And I'll see you in the next lesson. Alright guys, welcome to the next lesson. So we now know how to make a basic website, but to make it a bit more interesting and dynamic, we are going to need to use some JavaScript. So in this lesson, we will give you a very basic overview of JavaScript, and more importantly, some things you can do when ChatGPT gives you JavaScript code that does not work. As you may have found already in the past lessons, you really don't need to know very much about HTML and CSS to create a website with ChatGPT, but it is nice to recognize what is going on, so you are able to ask better questions to ChatGPT, and you're also quickly able to make some changes or fix things when they don't work. The same is true for JavaScript. So we are just going over some important functions and look at an example so we can understand the logic of what is happening in the JavaScript code. The first thing that is important to understand about JavaScript in contrast to HTML is that HTML is used to define the structure and layout of a web page, while JavaScript is used to add interactivity and dynamic behavior to a web web page by writing instructions that a computer can execute. JavaScript is a high-level programming language. This basically means that this language does not need to worry about any side tasks needed for a program to work, like finding storage. This is all done in the background. This is what a JavaScript looks like that makes a navigation bar scroll smoothly to that element on the page instead of just immediately jumping there like we saw before on our one-pager. We will go through this code step by step to kind of show you what is going on, and a lot of these steps you will also find in different JavaScript codes. First, at the top, a variable is created that links to an HTML element. Const stands for constant, and putting this before a variable name will make that a constant, so non-changeable variable. If you write const number equals 3, the variable will always be 3, so later writing number equals 2 will not work. If we skip down a little bit, you can see the word let in the same color as const. Let also creates a variable, but the let variable is able to change later on. Sometimes we have found ChatGPT can accidentally make a variable constant when it does need to change later on, which made the code not work, so that's something to keep an eye on. Now next we see that the constant variable navbarLinks is made equal to the function document.querySelectorAll. So the query selector selects an element of the HTML code. The normal query selector refers to just one element, and you could for instance place an ID of an HTML element in there. But here we have a navigation bar with multiple elements in it, so multiple tabs referring to multiple sections of the page, and that's why we add all to the end of query selector so that all of those elements in the navigation bar are selected. Now in the brackets behind that it says nav and a. This will select all the elements in the HTML file that have the elements nav and a. The nav refers to the navigation bar, and the A refers to the anchoring tag, as you can see here, which defines a hyperlink. So we basically select all the hyperlinks in the navigation bar, as you can see in this example. Alright, so now we see this constant variable navbarLinks that was just created, and this whole function is added to it. And this function will produce the desired behavior we want when clicking each element of the navigation bar. Now how this function works is that we first see the for each part, and this means that this function is going to apply to each of the elements of the navbarLinks constant that we just made, so basically all the tabs that we have in the navigation bar. And then it adds an add event listener, and it says click in its brackets. So this is going to get activated when any of the elements in the navbar are clicked. Add event listener basically waits until the specified event has occurred, and then it executes the function in its brackets, in this case the event function. And below here you can see this event function, and behind it it says prevent default. So normally without the JavaScript, when you click the navbar it will jump to that section immediately, and we want to stop that and have our smooth scroll instead. So prevent default stops that normal default behavior. Now moving on, we see this let, which as mentioned before is going to make a variable that can later be changed. So first a variable named target is created, and it is made equal to the value of the attribute href of the specific element that is clicked in the navbar. So in the event listener, one specific link in the navbar is selected when it is clicked, and this get attribute selects the actual reference in the navbar, for instance #about. And then the next variable that is created is the target element variable. This again, as we saw in the beginning, uses the query selector, but this time it does not have all behind it, so it only selects one element of our HTML code. And what it will select is the section that is referred to in the specific link in the navbar by using the target variable that was created one row up. So instead of having #about, this target element, when the about link in the navbar is clicked, will refer to the about section in our HTML file. Of course, this would all only work if the navbar in our HTML code correctly linked to each of the sections already, as it does in our website. Now finally, the actual scrolling happens in the last row. First, the target element is selected, which is the element in our HTML that the clicked link on the navigation bar refers to, and the scroll into view function is placed behind it. And there are two parameters in this function, namely behavior, which is set to smooth, so we will get a smooth scroll, which is exactly what we want, and block, which is set to center, so the center of our screen will scroll to the center of that element. So that is the whole JavaScript code for a smooth scroll of a navigation bar. Such step-by-step understanding of every code is not necessary at all, since ChatGPT will typically just give you working code. But now we have a basic understanding of what code variables refer to which parts, and the most important thing is to make sure the JavaScript correctly refers to the HTML elements using query selector and get attributes. Now in JavaScript there's not just one way to do things, but typically there are many ways to get the same result. Here you can for instance see another way to create the smooth scroll. A lot of these separate elements are the same, but instead of the for each function, here we have a for loop, and a slightly different scroll function is used as well. But if ChatGPT would give this as an output, and for instance a variable name would be wrong, I think you would now be able to find the error and fix it. There are some things you can do to make finding and solving errors a bit easier, and that's what we are going to look into now. Alright, so first I'm going to show you how to use inspect in the browser. So we are back at our website. Let's first go to preview in default browser, open in default browser. And I'm going to use Chrome in this example, and this is going to work slightly differently depending on which browser you're using, but the basics are going to be the same. So in Chrome, if you hit the right mouse button and hit inspect, this panel on the right here is going to pop up. And if we close it real quick, we can also get there by hitting Ctrl-Shift-I or by hitting Ctrl-Shift-C. So now first what it's going to show us is this Elements tab, and here we can actually see our HTML code, and if we hover over it, you can see that element on the browser, on the actual website, light up. And what's really cool about this is that by using color, it also displays what part of the element is the content, the padding, the border, and the margin. So if something looks wrong in the layout, you can check here what the problem is. So for example, in this About Me section, you can see the content is the blue part. And if we scroll down here, we can actually see a representation of what all the colors mean. So here the green part is the padding around the element, the blue is the actual content, and the red or the orange right here is the margin. So if we wanted this section to be a little bit smaller, we could actually just increase the margin of this element and it would be a smaller section. Or if we want it to be wider, we could decrease the margin. So that's the element section, but that's not what we're actually here for. If you go to the top here next to elements, there's the console. And this is where errors will pop up if there is some errors in loading your website. And as you can see here, there are 3 load errors. And that's because if we go to our code and we go to our portfolio section, we have this image slider right here, and it created random names for 3 images of the image slider. But of course, we don't actually have those images. And so it's going to give an error when trying to load those images. So now let me also quickly show you what an error in JavaScript looks like. So here is the JavaScript code that was made for the bakery website, which I had ChatGPT generate in the introduction of this course. So let's write here in this JavaScript const space number equals 3. So as we saw in the example, const is going to make a constant of this number, and the value of that number is going to be set to 3. And now let's write a semicolon, because that's part of the syntax of JavaScript. Everything has to end with a semicolon. And now we know this number, this variable, cannot change because it is a constant. But now if we write number equals 2 and semicolon, this should give an error because this number variable cannot change anymore. So let's hit Ctrl S to save this, and let's open this website. And now if we hit Ctrl-Shift-I to open the console, you can see that there is this error that it gave us, and it says assignment to constant variable. And it even tells us right here where the error occurred. So it happened at the JavaScript file at row 22, character 8. So if we go to our code, you can see right here at row 22, and then it happened at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So when we try to equal this variable to 2, that's when the error occurred. So that's very nice to know if we want to change the error ourselves. And that's the first thing that we can do. We can look at our code ourselves and try to fix it ourselves. But there's another thing we can do.
So when I get an error, I can also just ask ChatGPT to solve it for me. So I can select this part and copy it, and then go to ChatGPT. And then I'm going to type, I got this error in my JavaScript file. And then I'm going to paste the error. And I'm going to write, how can I fix this? And let's see what it gives us. And as you can see, it gives us exactly what we need. So right here, it tells us that we can change const to let. And then of course we wouldn't get the error because let you are able to change later on. And then here it tells us how we can problem solve if this variable isn't supposed to change, and to change our code so that it actually doesn't change. And then here it even tells us a specific situation where const is able to change if we assign it to a object or a string, but we don't need to worry about that right now. So the most important thing about this in the future is if you ever get an error in your website, you're now able to find that error and ask ChatGPT how to solve it.
And even if the error occurs in a code that ChatGPT gave you, and you tell it that it gave that error with that code, then ChatGPT is also able to change the code for you so that it doesn't get the error. So that's it for this lesson. In the next lesson, we are actually going to use JavaScript to make our website a little bit nicer. See you in that lesson. Alright guys, welcome to the next lesson. So in this one, we are going to create a smooth scroll down from the navigation bar, as we saw in the example of the JavaScript in the last lesson. And we are also going to finally get the image slider to work. So first, let's take a look at our website. So right here now we have this navigation bar, and down here we have this non-working image slider. So first off, this navigation bar isn't actually a scrolling navigation bar anymore because we made the multiple pages. So instead of scrolling down to portfolio, now it's just going to give us the portfolio page itself. So we first need to change that back to where it's actually going to send us down to the portfolio section. So let's go to our code. Let's just select the whole HTML code of the front page and copy it. And let's go to ChatGPT. And I'm going to type, this is the HTML code for my front page. Please add another navigation bar that scrolls down to each of the sections. So I hope this is going to give me a second navigation bar, so we're still able to go to the other pages, but we are also able to scroll down in the front page. So let's change this typo, let's make that please. And then let's hit a colon and add our HTML code. And let's hit enter and see if it can do that. Alright, so it looks like it wasn't able to finish the code. The servers are a bit overloaded at the moment, but it did give us this navigation section with hashtag about and hashtag and then all the sections. And that is actually the only part we need. So we can just copy this part, hit Ctrl C, and then go to Visual Studio and paste that below this navigation section. So now we have two navigation bars. So if we hit Ctrl S to save that, and we can take a look at that in our website. And there we go, this top one is going to send us to the pages. And if we go to the home page, we can hit testimonials and it will jump to testimonials. And now we want the JavaScript to make sure that it actually scrolls down nicely to that section instead of jumping there. So let's go to ChatGPT and I'm going to ask it, please give me the JavaScript code to make the navigation bar scroll smoothly to the section. And let's hit enter and see what it gives us. And it tells us we can use the scroll into view function, which we also saw in the last lesson. And right here it gave us this nice code, which is pretty similar to the one we saw in the last lesson with slight changes. But it looks like this should all work. And then here it even gives us a little bit of an explanation of what everything does. And then here it even tells us how we can link this to our HTML file. And similar to how you can have CSS code in the HTML file, as we saw in the explanation video of HTML and CSS, we can also place our JavaScript code in the HTML file by using this script tag. But that's not the nicest way to do it. So I actually want a separate JavaScript file, and I want to link that file to the HTML file, similar to how we have it now with the CSS file. So let's ask ChatGPT how we can do this. So I'm going to ask, I want a separate JavaScript file. How can I link this to my HTML file? And I'm going to hit enter. Alright, so it told us we can use this script tag to link to our JavaScript file, and here it's called main.js, so that's what we have to name our JavaScript file. And then we can place it in the head tag, but here it actually says it's best practice to put it at the bottom of our body element, and that is actually true. So it is best to put the JavaScript link at the bottom of our body so that this only loads once the rest of the page is already loaded. And then here it wants to tell us a different format that we can put the JavaScript code for smooth scrolling, but it didn't finish that, so I'm going to ask it to finish that. And it looks like it just gave us a different version of the scroll function, which we don't need because we'll just use the one at the top. So let's first select this link to the JavaScript file. Let's copy that and let's go to Visual Studio. And here is the index.html page. And let's go to the bottom of the body tag, and just above it, let's paste that link to the JavaScript file. And let's now actually create this JavaScript file right here in Visual Studio. So let's click new file right here and let's call that main.js and let's hit enter. And the .js is the extension of the JavaScript file. And now Visual Studio also knows that this is going to be a JavaScript file. And now let's go back to ChatGPT and let's select the JavaScript code for the smooth scroll. And let's go to Visual Studio and let's paste that right there. And let's hit Ctrl S to save it. And let's also save the index.html. Let's hit Ctrl S, there we go. And then let's go to the preview in the default browser. And now if we hit testimonials, it should scroll there nicely and it works. That's very nice. And let's hit contact and that works as well. All right, so that's the first part of our JavaScript for this lesson done. So now what we want to do is get the JavaScript to make the image slider work. So before we actually get the code to make this work, let's first find 3 images that we can use for our web design portfolio. So let's open a new browser and let's go to the OpenAI image generation website. So let's type in open.ai/images. And there we go. And let's type in amazing futuristic web design, digital art. And let's see what that gives us. So I wouldn't necessarily say these are images of web design, but they do look really nice. So I'm just going to choose 3 of them and add them to the folder in our Visual Studio code. Alright, so here we are back in Visual Studio, and right here in the folder you can see I added the 3 images. So now we can go to the portfolio section, which is right here, and delete this placeholder name, and we can start typing amazing and it will autofill, and we can just select the first one here and do the same for the other 2 images. And there we go. And if we now hit Ctrl S, and if we go to the preview in our browser, you can see right now we have these images in there and they are just displayed regularly without being an image slider. And now we are going to transform these 3 images, instead of just being stacked on top of each other, to actually be in an image slider. So let's go to ChatGPT and let's say, this is my HTML code for an image slider. Please give the JavaScript code to make it work. And then I'm going to go to Visual Studio, copy this slider section, hit Ctrl C, and I'm going to paste that in ChatGPT. And let's see if it can do that. Alright, so there is this JavaScript code and also some CSS code. And it looks like right here it wants to tell us that we need to link this to our HTML code. But we already did that. So I'm going to guess that it's not going to give us any more important information below this. So let's just first copy the CSS code. And let's go to Visual Studio. Let's go to our CSS file. And I think we already have some CSS code for the image slider. So let's find that. And here we have it. And so let's just paste that below there and hope there's no duplication or contradiction between these CSS codes. And let's hit Ctrl S and then let's go to ChatGPT again. Let's select the JavaScript code and copy it. And let's go to our JavaScript file and paste it just below the previous JavaScript file. And let's hit Ctrl S and let's see if it will now work. So let's scroll down. Awesome. So as you can see, we have this image slider and it just automatically scrolls through all the images in the slider. But I actually also want buttons so that we are able to scroll through them ourselves. So let's go to ChatGPT and let's ask it, I also want buttons with the image slider so I am able to scroll through it myself. And let's see if it can do that. Alright, so it gave us this JavaScript code and it looks like this JavaScript code is also going to edit our HTML file a little bit to get the buttons there, which is very nice. And then it also gave us some CSS code that we can use. So let's copy this JavaScript code and let's go to our Visual Studio code. Let's delete this old image slider code and let's paste the new one over it. And let's hit Ctrl S. And then let's see what it gave us for the CSS code. So it gave us this button code. So let's go to our CSS file and let's actually see if we don't already have a button element here. So let's hit Ctrl F to search and let's type in button. And here we use button, but it's the hashtag contact button, so that's not going to be a problem. And here it's also again the contact button. And let's see the other one. It's the header button. So I think we are fine to create CSS code with just the title button. So let's go to this slider part of our CSS code and let's paste the button code in there. And it looks like the other CSS code it gave us is just the same as what we already put there. So we don't need to add that. So now let's just hit Ctrl S to save it. And let's see if this actually worked. So let's open it in the default browser and let's scroll down. And now it looks like we don't see any of the images, but we do have these buttons. And once we click it, the pictures are going to pop up. So this is almost perfect, but I do want one of the images to be visible when a page loads. So let's go to ChatGPT and let's simply ask it, no image is visible when a page loads. Can you fix this? And let's change this typo. And let's hit enter. And so here it gave us some new JavaScript code, but here it says I'm assuming you have added 2 buttons to your HTML, which we haven't. And then here it also tells us that we could use some CSS code. So let's just ask ChatGPT to provide those HTML buttons and also the CSS code for us. So I'm going to ask it, I did not add the buttons to the HTML code. Please provide a new version of the HTML code for the slider that includes the buttons. And please also give the CSS code of the whole slider. And let's hit enter. And it looks like it didn't finish the code, so let's ask it to finish. Alright, so instead of just completing the JavaScript code, it actually gave us a whole new HTML and CSS code as well. So it looks like this HTML code it gave us first is the same as what it gave us here. So let's just copy this part and let's go to our HTML file and let's replace this slider. Let's hit Ctrl V to paste that. And now as you can see, it also includes these 2 buttons in our HTML code. Then let's copy this CSS code. Let's go to our CSS file and let's select all the slider rules in our CSS file and let's replace that with the new CSS it gave us. And then let's finally also copy the new JavaScript and let's paste that over the old JavaScript of the image slider. And let's paste that and then let's hit Ctrl S and then let's also go to the other files, the CSS file, let's save that one as well, and the HTML file, let's save that. And then let's go see if this worked. So let's scroll down and here we go. So here we have this image and it loaded right away. And now we have these buttons here. It's not very pretty, so I would have preferred them to be on the side here, but it's very functional and it's fine for now. So I hope you were able to follow along and the JavaScript isn't too complicated. And I also hope this image slider example showed you how easy it is to have ChatGPT just change the code for you and make adjustments to your wish. So that's it for this lesson. See you in the next one. Alright guys, welcome to the next lesson. In this one, we are going to make the contact form of our website work. So the information that is submitted in this contact form is actually saved to a database. Now there are 2 ways to connect our contact form to a database. We could use an online hosting service and publish our website and use their servers to connect the form, or we could set up local hosting on our computer to test the form. In the next section of this course, we are actually going to set up online hosting and publish our website to the world. But for now, as a nice exercise, we are first going to set up local hosting on our computers. This is also for those who may not want to publish their website or purchase hosting just yet, but do want to learn how to connect a website to a database. So to set up a local server for local hosting, we are going to use the XAMPP software. Alright, so to download XAMPP, we first need to go to apachefriends.org. And let's hit enter. And let's click the top link right here, apachefriends.org. And then right here we can download XAMPP for our specific operating systems. So I'm going to download it for Windows. And then it should download in a few seconds. So I've waited around a minute and it still hasn't downloaded. So I'm just going to do what it says up here. So if it doesn't download automatically, click here. So here is XAMPP Windows. Let's just click that. And let's click download latest version. And there it goes. Alright, so once that's downloaded, just click it to start the installation process. And here we get to the setup wizard, so let's click next. And then here at the select component window, it's important that we have Apache, MySQL, PHP and MyPHPadmin selected. The rest of these are optional. So let's click next because they are all connected. Then you can select the directory where you want this to be installed. And it's best to just leave this right there on the hard drive where it's set to be as default. And let's click next. Language English, that's nice. And let's click next to actually start installing. Alright, so once it's installed, it's going to ask us if we want to open the control panel right after finishing. And we do want that, so let's make sure this is checked and then let's hit finish. Alright, so here it opens the control panel. And now here we have a list of modules. And right here we can click start to start the servers for those modules. And we want to start them for Apache and MySQL. So let's click start on Apache first. And then let's also click start on MySQL. And it's going to start those servers on these ports. And what that means exactly doesn't really matter for right now. So what we want to do for right now is go to the MySQL module and click on admin. And this is going to open up phpMyAdmin for us. And this is the same database program that we are going to use when we are actually going to host our own website online. So what we want to do in phpMyAdmin right now is create a table that we can link to our contact form. And so that every time our contact form is filled in, it's going to create an entry into that table. So to create a table, first we need to create a new database. So let's click new on the top left right here. And we can give that database a name. So for instance, my_database. And let's click create. And then we can create the actual table. So we can create a table name and then give it a number of columns. So let's first give it the name email_list. And then it asks us for the number of columns. So let's go to our contact form in our website. So we have it right here in our contact page. And we can see that we have 3 fields. We have the name field, the email field, and the message field. And we want all of those to have its separate column. And we can also check this if we hit right mouse button, open in default browser. And that's going to open up that page for us. And you can also see right here that we have 3 fields, the name field, the email field, and the message field. So let's go back to phpMyAdmin. So we have 3 fields that we actually want to fill up with content, but we actually want 4 columns because we also are going to want an ID column. And that's just basically going to be the index that's going to give one specific number to every entry in our contact form. So this is all good. It says email list and the number of columns is 4, which is exactly what we want. And let's hit create. So now right here we can configure our table. So we can give each column a different name and we have to indicate what type of variable is going to be filled in to those columns. So for example, the name is not going to be an integer because an integer is going to be a number. But for the ID that we do want a number. So let's make this first column, let's make that the ID. So the name of that column is the ID. The type is going to be an integer, that's basically just round numbers. And for the ID column, we are also going to want to check this AI box. And that's not artificial intelligence. AI right here stands for auto increment. And that basically is going to add one number to every entry. So it starts with 0 or 1 and then just going to count up every time the contact form is filled in. So let's fill in the names of the other columns. So the first one is going to be name. The second one is going to be email. And the final one is going to be the actual message. So now a name is not an integer variable. So names and email and the message as well are just going to be letters or strings of characters. And the type of variable we want to select for that is the second one right here, varchar. So we can select that for each of these other variables. And then right here behind it, we can set the length or the number of values that we allow for the entry. So for the name, let's set that to 50 so people can have a very long name. The email as well, let's just set that to 50. And then for the message, we want to allow a little bit more. So maybe we can have a max length of the message of 250 characters. And that's all we need to do here. So we can just click save. And here you can see it created this table for us. Alright, so now this table should actually work. And we should be able to send data to this local table that we have just created. But for that, we are first going to need to change some things to our code to actually send the data over there. And for that, we're actually also going to need yet another coding language, namely PHP, which is a server-side language that we are also going to use when we are actually going to host our website online. And right here, when we're doing this local hosting, we can already get a feel for how this works. But I don't think we actually need to know how PHP works to get this contact form working if we just ask ChatGPT to explain it to us and have ChatGPT just give us the code. So let's go to ChatGPT. Alright, so let's see if ChatGPT can give us the steps that we need to take to set up the contact form using local hosting. So I'm going to ask it, how do I connect a contact form in HTML to a local table in phpMyAdmin? And let's hit enter. Alright, so it's telling us we need to use PHP. So first we need to create a new table in phpMyAdmin, which we already did. Alright, so in the form element in HTML, we need to add an action attribute and connect that to the name of a PHP script. Then we also need to, of course, create a PHP script. And then it's going to tell us some functions that we can use in the PHP. But I actually want ChatGPT to give me those functions. So let's type, please provide some more detail and provide the PHP code I would need. And let's hit enter. Alright, so it gave us some PHP code and it tells us we need to change some of the variables here to make them connect to our actual database. And then it also gave us this HTML code, and this is just an example of a form. Of course, we are going to have a slightly different form, as you can see here. But as you can see here in the form tag, we need to add this action and this method attribute. And it also explains here why we need that. So let's just copy that part and paste that in our form tag right there. And let's go back to ChatGPT. And then it looks like we also have to put this in the input tags. So if we go to our contact form, it looks like we already have all of these attributes that it wants us to put in the label and in the input tag. So I think that should all work. All right, now up here, it told us that after the action attribute, we have to add the URL of our PHP script. So right here, you can see it says formhandler.php. So that's what we have to name the PHP script that we are going to make right now. So let's just copy that. And let's create a new file right here in Visual Studio Code. And let's give it that name, formhandler.php. And let's hit enter. And that's going to be our PHP script. And so let's just copy this PHP code and paste it in right here. Alright, so now let's go back to this PHP code, because right here it said something else we had to do. So it looks like we need to set the host username and password according to our database. So let's quickly go to our database right here in phpMyAdmin. And then if we go to the privileges tab, we can see right here that the username is going to be root. Then here it says the host name, and right here we have this local host option. And for privileges and grant, it says all privileges and yes. So there is no password restrictiness. So if we go back to Visual Studio Code, we can look right here and it looks like ChatGPT already gave us the right host name. So it gave us localhost, the username, it gave us root, and it gave us no password. So all of those default values it already automatically gave us, which is very nice. And then also right here it says database name equals my database, but we actually called our database my underscore database. So we have to change that. So let's write an underscore in between there. And then finally, it looks like right here it says insert the data into the database, and it's going to insert it into contact form. But this is actually not what we called our table. We called it email list. So let's change this to email list. There we go, and let's hit Ctrl S to save that. And let's go back to index.html. And right now this code should actually all work. But if we now go to the preview in our default browser and we go to this contact form and we type it in 1, 2, 3 and we hit send, it's going to give me an error message that we need to add an actual email address. So let's write to@email.com and let's hit send. And then we're going to get this PHP code right here. And it doesn't really look like it executed. And if we go to our local hosting and we go to the email list, right here we see our table and we see that it's still empty. So it didn't get the entry from the contact form that we just filled in. And that's because if we go to our Visual Studio Code and we go to the PHP file, here it says it's connecting to the database. But in order for this to work, this PHP file actually has to be in a specific location, in a specific folder in XAMPP that we just installed. So the way to make this actually work is by going to our file explorer and going to the folder where we save all our website codes. And then right here we have the folder for the website that we are working on, and we can just copy that whole folder that has all the files inside it, including the formhandler.php. And then we have to go to the XAMPP file, to the actual folder where it's installed. And so typically this will just be the first folder in your hard drive. And then if we scroll down to XAMPP right here, we can double click that. And then we're going to look for the folder called htdocs. And we're going to double click that. And then we are going to place right here the folder of our Visual Studio Code website. And now we can just open our browser. So we can just open Chrome right here. And then just in the browser, we can type localhost / my first website / index.html. So this should open the front page of our website. So if we hit enter, we can see we didn't find it, and that's because if we go to our file, we have spaces in our folder name, and the browser doesn't like that. So let's change those spaces by underscores. And let's hit enter. And then let's go to the browser again and put underscores in between there. And let's hit enter. And there we go, there we have our website, and this is actually the website that's stored in the XAMPP folder. So this one should now be connected to our database and our table. So if we now write test at test.com and test, and we hit send, we can actually see right here, new record created successfully. And if we then go to phpMyAdmin right here and we click refresh, right here we see this entry with name test, email test@test.com, and message test. So this works. So this contact form is now connected to the database. So finally, if we go to our website by again typing localhost / my first website / index.html, finally, every part of our website is actually working. And what's really cool about this is that we didn't even have to go through how any of this code really works. Of course, we could always have asked ChatGPT to explain to us how certain parts of this code work. And if it didn't work, we also could have just asked it to solve it for us. But it all just works in the first try, which is very nice. All right, so that's it for this lesson. See you in the next one.